Hello and welcome back to another episode of Coffee Wednesday, the weekly segment where we get to sit down and talk about bringing the magic of reading and words back into your life. And today, we're going to talk about something that's actually keeping the magic at your front porch, so you're not letting it in. And that thing might be something that I needed to make a long time ago, and it has something to do with the last 8 years of my life. And yes, today we're going to talk about the paradoxical thing that's probably going to happen once you've accumulated enough reading techniques, once you've accumulated enough note-taking techniques, and once you have a bag of gimmicks ready with you. This could happen to you. Sometimes when you flick open the first page of a book that you're really excited about, and all of a sudden you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm going to inspect the chapter before I read it because Robin told me to do it. Okay, that Joe Schmo right there told me to like not pause when I'm reading. And this other person there, he kind of told me not to sound every single word out because sub-vocalization's bad. So you have all these things in your head. You start thinking to yourself, oh my God, I feel so overwhelmed. I actually don't want to read today. And then you put your book away, you potter around, and 6 hours gone, and you think to yourself, why did I not read more this month? And that is the problem that we're going to talk about today. In certain cases, even though the reading techniques that I've shared on this channel, they work under certain contexts, even though all the reading tips that you've gathered from the internet, and even I'm including productivity systems like note-taking, journaling, bullet journal method, all these things, they could be wonderful tools. But without the context that I'm going to give you in today's video, they could actually backfire. You could actually have a system that's perfectly good, but without this proper context that we're going to talk about today, they could actually end up running you. So we got a good show coming up today. So before we start, now there's a podcast feed for this show, Coffee Wednesday. So instead of staring at my face for the next 15 to 20 minutes, you can actually head on over to the link in the description and download me into your phone so you can listen to the show when you're on a commute, when you're out for a run, when you're going to the school to pick up your kids, wherever, whenever you want to get some magic of literature back into your life. So let's begin today's show. So I actually want to start with a story that happened in the early 2000s. So early 2000s was a weird time. And in the 90s, we've witnessed many amazing technological advancements, from the launch of the legendary gaming little gaming box from Nintendo 64, to the launch of the Hubble Space Telescope, all the way to the invention of the internet a few decades before that. But with the internet also came another technology that sucked the entire world into the screen. And that technology is email. So email existed in this paradoxical world where some people found surplus value in being able to communicate with one another over email. For example, in a recent newsletter by Carl Newport, he actually brought up this example of a woman who worked in mergers and acquisitions. So before the days of email, you would kind of camp outside the office and wait for that damn fax machine to start spitting out the documents, right? And then after the documents are out, you're ready to go home, sign the thing, but you have to come back to the office tomorrow, shove that thing in, refax it out. So it's very laborious. But now with email, you can simply attach the document and send it to the person. So it saved a lot of time for certain knowledge workers, but it did not end well. It did not free up any time for Merlin Mann. So Merlin Mann was in an article titled, published in a New Yorker, titled "The Rise and Fall of Getting Things Done." And in this article, Merlin Mann described his email situation as like, I spend 40% of the time doing actual work, but 60% of my time, I'm kind of just pottering around. I'm answering back and forth conversations in the long email chain. I'm not actually getting any productive work done. So he was kind of lost in this email matrix. And then, email's kind of like this double-edged sword. It reduced the distance between people. And it basically closed the gap of communication, but at the cost of constantly being online. So Merlin Mann, being the kind of person that he had a pretty precise he had an engineering background. And he found this system in the early 2000s called Getting Things Done by David Allen. So in case you don't know what David Allen's system is, back when I was in high school, I was completely obsessed with the Dave Allen system. I used to carry these like crazy boxes of index cards, and my classmates would always look at me weird. It's like, why are you even doing this? Like, what's the point of this? But I'm like, you don't get it. This is called getting things done. This is a whole system. So essentially, the philosophy of the system wants you to capture all the tasks that you want to do throughout the day and organize them into and delegate all these tasks into specific folders, so that you can manage them and you can execute them by category. So it's like this very elaborate kind of productivity system by David Allen. So Merlin Mann, in the early 2000s, around 2003, he found a system extremely useful because it kept his email sludge pile under control. So all of a sudden, he was experiencing great sort of benefits from the system. He got so excited that he started a blog called 43 Folders. So 43 Folders was essentially this website and a blog where he shared productivity tips about how to organize or how to start your own getting things done system and all the amazing benefits that come with this email organizational system. So it sounds great on paper, and the blog got so popular, in fact, that he eventually quit his job to do this blog full time, and he became one of the early pioneers of a subculture called productivity prawn. So productivity prawn is basically porn spelled with a number 0 in it, and the spaces between an R and a 0 are switched. So it's basically a modification of the 2000s leet speak, which is kind of like this codified way of communicating where people tend to encode all your messages into numbers and into different letters so that people can't read it as well. So it's a modification of that. So this productivity prawn became such a phenomenon that he basically built himself a pretty nice career out of it. So he would operate his day, he would work on his day with the 43 folder system, and he would write about the 43 folder system until it got to the point where he realized that he hit the turning point of letting the system run him. So if you really think about it, Merlin Mann found himself the perfect strange loop. He's kind of like one of those people who keep walking up Escher's stairs, so he's just going to end up precisely where he started. He was living productivity, but he was also writing about productivity for a living. So this created a situation where it's the perfect storm for a productivity system to go out of control, where eventually he was forced to do this productivity system because he needs to write about it, and he writes about it and feeds back into this productivity system. And then around the early 2010s, he wrote a post called Cranking. And in this post, he expressed some frustrations with this whole blog that he's been running. And eventually, he shut the whole thing down. The whole thing disappeared overnight. But just like someone irresponsible leaving a wedding right before you're about to take your vows, the damage was already done. So the productivity porn culture evolved from productivity prawn, eventually became such a phenomenon that people actually became more obsessed with the systems themselves than the benefits that the systems are supposed to bring into your life. We have allowed certain productivity systems to run us. We have adopted a kind of mindset that like where we want this stuff to work for us. And yes, when you first adopt a certain technique like the mindfulness journal, or when you adopt one of my reading techniques, it might give you upfront benefits, but over time, as the system gathers steam, and as you start to put on elaborate spins on a system, over time, just like the example that we used when we started this video, right when you crack open a new book and you're very excited about it, these systems could subconsciously paralyze you from doing the thing in the first place. So you actually end up creating a massive time sink. The 43 folder system for Merlin Mann actually turned into a massive commitment. It generated a lot of background anxiety, which is kind of ironic because these systems were literally designed for you to minimize all that anxiety in the first place. And that brings me to perhaps the main point of today's video, after that whole story right there, which is sometimes if you don't know what you truly want, if you haven't defined a precise metric within you, with regards to what you want to achieve. For example, I want to read more. For example, I want to exercise more. For example, I want to eat better. If you don't have that metric precisely defined, if you haven't really discovered what you truly are curious about, what do you actually want to read? Let's not just talk about reading more. What are you actually interested in? If you haven't defined that and you just find a substitute system so as to circumvent this entire self-discovery process, in the long run, in the medium to the long run, these systems will end up taking over your whole life, the way 43 folders took over Merlin Mann's life. So I really want us to think about this phenomenon of over-investing in note-taking techniques, reading techniques, and all the things in between. So here's a fundamental problem that I see with that approach, which is the minute you start to put complete faith wholesale in a system, you actually want to purchase the knowledge of the person who's selling you the system. You actually don't want to go through this whole process of messy self-discovery. You don't want to go through the process of figuring out what you want to read through reading a bunch of stuff that you don't like. That process is extremely messy. That process, there's no guaranteed outcome because all of us are different. What I read and the systems that I use for my reading, they won't necessarily work for you. I have a very elaborate kind of note-taking system in place. It's hooked up to the Centopicon. I got 3 physical notebooks with me. I also got this damn thing that I got recently. And all of these are interconnected, and they make perfect sense for me. It might look elaborate from the outset, and you might be tempted to adopt my precise system, and you might want to take all the advice that I gave you in the past 8 years on this channel wholesale and say, that's going to fix my life. But what you cannot purchase or what you cannot gain from my templates and from my advice and from everything on this channel is precisely the knowledge that I had to go through, or the messy process that I had to go through to get to this point of clarity. And in retrospect, everything looks very clear to me. And all I have to do is to sit up here and teach you guys how I got here, right? But if you don't have the context of systems, productivity-wise, note-taking-wise, or anything that you want to do with your life, any system, their origin is actually someone else's solution to their problem. My problem with reading academic papers led me down this rabbit hole of, engaging with digital tablets or e-ink tablets. Or my frustration with not being able to see my ideas clearly led me down a rabbit hole of creating this Centopicon template. So all these things were my kind of little solutions and little tweaks to my environment so that I can solve this specific problem. But if you detach my experience from that system, it's probably going to take on the effect of running you over time. And this isn't to say all productivity systems are useless, and we're not saying everything I've talked about on this channel is useless. But we're simply saying that if you don't have enough degree of self-discovery, if you haven't figured out your starting point, if you haven't really crystallized what reading means for you, what curiosity means for you, and what education means for you, these systems are simply band-aids for a festering wound. In the long term, you'd have to rip it off and clean it up, and that cleaning process requires resonance. So resonance is an idea that I would propose as the alternative to this systems running people thing. Because something that I talked about in last week's video is keeping a resonance journal. I'm going to keep batting that point home until people start to do something about it. So resonance journal is essentially a journal where whenever you encounter something that captures your attention, whenever you find an idea that you really love, and whenever you find a clip from a movie that you really, really like, you want to collect these points of resonance. You want to feel something, and you want to collect them down. So instead of just blindly pursuing some platonic ideal of I should reading this way, that's going to guarantee me the best results, you should actually tune into resonance. What resonates with you? What about this book that's really speaking to you? What about that scene from the movie that really welled up this melancholy or this feeling of excitement? Note those moments down, and then at the end of every month, find common themes in these moments. And chances are, if you're a little bit bookish, a lot of these moments are going to come from engaging with a literary discourse. You see a book on a new release list. You think to yourself, I'd really like to read that book. Note that moment down. And these are the moments that's going to help you build in a compass to then go out there to seek out systems that work for you. And here's where advice giving comes in, because there are a lot of these people who have gone through the precise process. They've been through the whole gauntlet run of figuring out what doesn't work, and their systems might work for you. They might have a little nugget of wisdom in one of their systems, but you actually need to use this inner compass that you've developed from your resonance journal to go out there and to test and to see if the system is going to work for you, and to observe improvements in your surroundings and improvements in your comprehension when you're reading. Only when you can verify that can you allow a system into your life. Whereas if you're just blindly heading to a system thinking that it's going to solve all the problems in your life, like a magic pill, like a magic seed, if you take this seed, everything's going to disappear. Over time, this system is going to start to gather such momentum and start running you. It turns from a means to an end to ends in themselves. And over time, of course, you're going to feel paralyzed. And over time, of course, you're going to start to dread reading. And over time, yes, these techniques, they're going to get really exhausting to keep up. So if you're at that stage of your reading journey, if you're at that stage of still discovering what you want to read, here are 3 takeaways that I want to give you. So number 1, systems are something that you need to look out for, including my systems, including my tips and tricks on reading advice. Find systems and view them in a skeptical light. So whenever someone pitches you a one-size-fits-all solution for reading a book, including in the future, I might share some of my productivity systems, or the way that I manage my writing on my newsletter, and the way that I work content creation to my schedule, I might share that in the future, but I would always preface all of those videos with, this might not work for you, and you need to be skeptical of what I'm sharing here. Be very skeptical of systems that promise you a one-size-fits-all solution, because chances are that system came from a very specific set of experiences and problems, and there's solutions for those problems. So be very skeptical of these one-size-fits-all systems that you think is going to fix all your problems overnight. And number 2, tune into your resonance journal every month. Write down certain things that resonate with you and use that as an inner compass to be daring and courageous enough to seek out sources and seek out books that you've never heard of. You don't need a New York Times best-selling list to tell you what you should read next. You should just follow whatever it is that resonates with you, and then hopefully through that entire process, you can develop your own little TBR for your life. You can develop your own little clan of authors, and that's what makes discussions about literature more interesting. Imagine if we're just all talking about Ryan Holiday or Mel Robbins, all these best-selling titles. This is not a dig towards Ryan Holiday. I actually really like Ryan Holiday's books. But imagine that is all we talk about. Imagine there's just a few classics that we all talk about, like Dostoevsky's White Knight, or Notes from Underground, or Crime and Punishment. That creates a pretty stale literary discourse. Whereas if you have someone who barges in here with a title that you've never heard of, and then they're completely excited about it, and they want to talk to you about it, and then you go ahead and read that book and you discover that, that's a really, really good book. That's what actually creates interesting discussions. Whereas blanket recommendations and one-size-fits-all kind of this is the best book you're going to ever read in your life, that's detrimental to the kind of variety that we want in literary discussions. So you want to keep your resonance journal close to your heart and judge everything based on your inner compass, not through external recommendations. And number 3, don't turn systems into ends in themselves. Just stop treating them as things that are solid presences in your life. Because at some point, you didn't have any of these systems. If you're a 14-year-old kid just cracking open a book, you weren't thinking about these systems. And you weren't really thinking about how can I read better? You simply enjoyed reading. That's what we're trying to get back into. But now we've distracted ourselves with all these elaborate things that are going to promise certain results, and so that we forget to tune into what the problem is. You can only define that problem and diagnose that problem and solve that problem yourself. So whenever you struggle to read, don't just immediately look for a solution and find a system that you're going to devote yourself to for the next, for the next 6 months. Instead, tune into yourself. Find the ailment that you're struggling with. Is it because you can't stay focused? Is it because you can't really comprehend what's going on the page? Is the book too difficult for you? Or is it too easy for you? Are you getting bored? Or are you getting too saturated with information? What is it? Those are the diagnoses that only you can make, because only you are you. And once you have enough of these data points, note them down in your residence journal, and then rinse and repeat. Be skeptical of systems that promise a one-size-fits-all solution. Be courageous enough to find your own inspirations and material. And last of all, don't turn systems into solid presences and potential solutions for your problems, because you actually need to diagnose those problems first. And then the interesting thing is going to happen. You will start to branch out into the world with your own system. And the system is going to look so weird, it's going to make no sense to other people. Probably not going to even make sense to me. You might adopt such a beautifully idiosyncratic system that makes no sense to anyone else, but you're the one who's using it. You're the one who has diagnosed the problem. You found a solution for that problem, either through research or taking someone else's advice. And now you've developed a very sustainable long-term system that caters itself around all the chaos in your life, that caters that's designed around how you want your reading life to unfold. So instead of pursuing an ideal, tune back in yourself, because the ideal system is not out there, it is within you. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and I look forward to doing more of these long-form kind of journalist, putting a little research in there, tell a story. And these videos are really take a lot of time to research, and in fact, there's a companion article for this video that you can read in the description down below. And I hope that you guys have gained some value from this episode, and we will be right here. We'll be back right here next week on Wednesday for another episode. Rob Malden here. Take care, and goodbye.